Welcome to a video tutorial where I would like to teach you one of the most fundamental strategies in all of chess to be winning games. I'm talking about situations where you end up with better army, perhaps it's more developed out of the opening, or your army is better centralized out of the opening, or perhaps your opponent's king is still stuck in the center because they have delayed to castle. In such instances, the direction of your play should be to open up the position, which in chess means to exchange the pawns. You see, when you're exchanging the pawns, then you're clearing the lanes, the files, the diagonals, then your pieces get to touch more valuable pieces of opponents. You get to see their kings, queens, and other pieces that would give you tactical opportunities. We're going to look at two examples where we have a better developed army and we have to open up the position, and also two examples where opponent has delayed castling and it's time for us to strike in the center to be able to hit opponent's king with more pieces. So this is the first one. As you can see in this position, there's a massive difference in how the pieces look. Mainly, I would like to pinpoint the difference in the bishops. And so what white needs to do in this case, you can see that the pawn on d4 is hanging, is to consider opening up the position. In order to open up the position, as we have discussed, we have to look for a pawn trade. And one that we have over here is to play d4 to d5. Now, that is not just to exchange a lonely isolated pawn, which may seem weak to some of the players, but this is also, as I've mentioned, to develop the initiative. The idea is that these two pawns, if we take them away, they're more in the way of white's pieces than they are in the way of black's pieces. You can immediately see how the white queen and rook will be able to look at the dark square bishop on e7. After the massive trades on d5, white is going to end up with the knight or the bishop on a more active square on d5. It's true that some of the black's pieces might benefit as well from the pawn trading, but it's all about which army is benefiting more overall. So in this position, white strikes with the move d5. We have takes and takes. Over here we have massive amounts of trades. So we had takes and takes. And even though tactically it may seem to a tactician that all we did was an even trade, strategy is suggesting that this is the right way to play, and it hopes to give us tactical opportunities because we're following the right strategic decision. So we're opening up the position when we have a better, more developed army. And there you can see immediately I'm threatening the knight. Subsequently, I can take the bishop, and we have a tactical opportunity that's called remove the guard. So if we follow the best line for black, for instance, bishop f6 stepping out of the fire over here, white can play now rook a to d1 and again has a tactical threat. We want to take on f7 and subsequently take this light square bishop over here for free. So let's say they played the best move again with rook f8. Now we can play bishop e4. We're discovering the attack against the bishop, and after this we have queen to c2. And from here we have ideas of taking on h7, invading on d6, and pinning the knight to the queen. As you can see, white has an initiative. They did the right strategic decision to open up the position, and that gives us these tactical opportunities. They don't appear out of magic. They come from superior position. Let's take a look at another example. In this position, there's again difference in activity. White's rooks are way more active than black's rooks. And as you can see, if we're going to be playing the move pawn to d5, after d-trade and pawns, they are more in the way of the white's pieces because they're in the way of white's rooks and queen on the d and e files than they are in the way of black's pieces. So when you're playing the game, the thinking process is like, I observe the position, what are the imbalances? And you could notice the difference in the activity of your pieces. You already have developed the rooks. And then the idea to open up the position comes to your mind. Now, whether you should open up now, one move later, two moves later, depend on your individual skills to evaluate this concrete position. So strategy is giving you direction. It says the best way to get an advantage of such type is to open up the position. And here white can strike immediately with d5. We have a threat against e6, so black took, and now we can take with the rook, and immediately again we have a tactical opportunity. I want to take on g7 over here, and after king was to take, with our queen we can take the bishop. So for black the best move would be to play bishop f6. From here on we can take, let's say queen takes, and we can continue the initiative with rook to d7. So black is on defense, and that's where chances to win the game appear on the board. Anything else would have led to position without an advantage for the white pieces. And this is something that looks great. All right, so now let's take a look at two examples where we have opponent's king that is stuck in the center. So once again, at first, when you observe the board, you might be thinking about tactical opportunities. There are none over here. And then you switch your mind to thinking strategically. And then what you do is you observe the position, you observe the imbalances, and at some point you notice, hopefully pretty quickly, that opponent's king is stuck in the center. Now, in order for you to be able to touch it and attack it more, to develop initiative against it, we need to clear the lines. So the move that we're considering over here is d4. Not only we're going to develop the initiative, but we get rid of the isolated pawn that we had. And so in this position, what was played was pawn takes d4. Black takes, first of all, not the pawn, but takes the rook and lands the check. That would be an in-between move. So we're getting a piece into the game with the tempo. That's a nice extra option that black has. White only could block with the pieces going backwards. So bishop went back to e2. Now knight to d4 had takes. The bishop is under attack, so white played takes and takes. And even though it's possible to save this position for white, it's pretty uncomfortable. Once again, we have these tactical opportunities because white cannot castle, as we would be able to take the knight and then subsequently take the bishop. And the game is very easy. Black has all active pieces. The light square bishop easily comes into the game, and then the rook follows. All of the pieces will be developed, and it's up for white to be finding those difficult defending moves here and survive the position. So once again, the thinking process is to observe the imbalances from the very start, and the direction when opponent's king is stuck in the center would be to ask yourself if you can open up the position to be developing the initiative. And last but not least is this example where, unfortunately for black, what happened was he allowed this knight to c6, queen has moved away, and then white was able to disturb black's castling rights in this game. And so you can ask yourself again, what is the imbalance in the position? Maybe you have long-term asset like the bishop pair, but you also have a short-term advantage of black's king losing the right to castle. Now, I always like to ask also myself for how long my opponent's king is weak. In other words, if we are trying to sound smart, we can ask if their king is statically or dynamically weak. How weak is it in the long run? And I could notice that if my opponent was to play rook to e8 and king to f8, that king looks pretty safe. So you have just a couple of moves to open up and develop the initiative in this position. Now I want to clear the lane so that more of my pieces could join the attack. I noticed that if I simply land a check, it's going to be blocked by pawn to c5, and I don't have a long-term attack against the king. It's spark without fire. So what I need to do is I need to strike with e4 to open up lanes. So the candidate selection of candidate moves for me would be e4 or rook e1 followed by e4 or knight c3 followed by e4. In this game, white played knight to c3 because at the same time, while it's preparing this break e4, it also hits the pawn. So black defended against that idea, and now white strikes with e4. Now this allows us to move more pieces into the hunt of opponent's king. So what we had was b5. Now, not only the queen is attacking this time, but also the knight is joining the party. Notice that I'm not threatening the fork over here due to the bishop, but we have this ongoing initiative, bishop f4, threatening this covered attack to hit the queen, and then rook to c1 came, c6 is hanging, the other rook is coming to e1, black simply resigned. So this strategy of opening up position when A, you have more developed army, more centralized army, and B, when opponent's king is in the center, is one of the most important directions, strategic directions in all of chess. If you're enjoying the video, consider hiring me as your personal online chess coach. I'll be waiting for emails. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye-bye.